A big Monday in the association. The Bucks come down from 17 down against the Knicks to win. The Celtics halt the Bulls' ways, and Kevin Durant out a month with the Nets rolling. So much to get to on today's Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NBA podcast. I'm Tony East, one of the hosts of Locked On Pacers. He's David Ramil, one of the hosts of Locked On Heat. We got a lot to get to because there's a big news from Brooklyn and some fun games in the NBA tonight. We'll start in Chicago, where the Bulls, who seemingly always beat good teams, did not this time and fell to the Celtics. The Bucks and Knicks played a weird game where the Bucks were down a bunch and still won, and Awesome and Julius Randle was not. Big news in the league. Kevin Durant out a month with an MCL injury for the Nets. David, take us to Boston for this Bulls-Celtics game. What were the key takeaways here?
Well, as you pointed out, the Bulls had been able to hold their own for most of the season against the top teams in the East. 6-1, I think, against the Sixers, Bucks, and who's it? Anyway, yeah, top teams in the Eastern Conference there. But either way, not so good against the Boston Celtics tonight. Jason Tatum with 32 points. He looked dominant. His shot was falling. And despite that, the Bulls were able to hang for most of the game. They were able to stay close for about the first half or so. And then eventually Boston pulled away. DeMar DeRozan goes out with a quad injury. He's not expected to miss a significant amount of time in the third quarter. And then Zach LaVine starts going off. He winds up having 27 points of his own, 4 of 13 shooting from three-point range. So not very efficient, but at least he was productive. He kept Chicago in it. And then Boston suddenly remembered, oh yeah, they're just the Bulls. And they decided to dominate the way they always do with some great defense. Robert Williams had a pretty solid game overall. Al Horford hits a big shot down the stretch. They pull away from that. And then the final score, 107-99. It's an interesting game, again, for the Celtics to be able to prove that they can flip that switch. And I think that was, something that I was curious about, having gone through the ups and downs of the season so far. Obviously, they've been very, very good. They're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And at the same time, they had, struggled a little bit. They've cooled off from their incredibly hot start, their historically good hot start. And here they are now and still able to beat a plucky Bulls team, despite the fact that they were missing DeRozan. And it was a good game overall. Not the most exciting contest, perhaps, but again, showing off the depth and quality of the Boston Celtics roster.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of what the style the Celtics want to have on a night-to-night basis this regular season, because, correct me if I'm wrong, this was Robert Williams' first start of the season, and he's been working back. So he starts at the 5, and they're a great offensive team. Well, they were, like you said, one of the best ever, really, to open the season. But defense was their identity last year, and with Robert Williams the starting 5, they can be much better on that end. So in a game where they shoot under 27% from deep, they get outshot from the field by the Bulls, right? The fact that they were able to hold the Bulls to 99 points and get this win, I think, speaks to what they're trying to do. And even without Marcus Smart, they can go Derek White, Jalen Brown, Rob Williams, Tatum Horford. Like, that's a really good defensive starting 5. And I think you'll see this team as they've kind of emerged from, I don't even know what to call what they had. They definitely slumped for a little bit, but it was like a really short amount of time. But You know what I'm saying. They've already emerged from their down part of the season, and I think their defense has been a big reason why.
Yeah, that's a good point. They still look like the favorites in the East. I think you have to give the Nets some consideration, and we'll talk a little bit about how the Kevin Durant news will impact their regular season and their chances at the playoffs. But at the same time, I think they're still one of the better teams there. Obviously, Cleveland is doing pretty well themselves, but I would still tip my hat to the Celtics just because of their depth, because if they can continue to get the kind of productivity that they got from Robert Williams tonight, and they get it consistently throughout the season, it just makes them so much more dangerous. Brian Scalabrine making the point in the broadcast that he helps their spacing. I'm not sure exactly how he does that, but it's still impactful. It's just a vertical lob threat. So aggressive on the perimeter, blocking shots all over the place, just so active on defense. It was shades of the Robert Williams that emerged as one of the best defensive players in the league last year. So good night for him.
Yeah, the DeRozan injury obviously hurts, and LaVine's been shooting much better for the Bulls on their winning streak. Still hit
not tonight, but yeah,
not tonight, but hit 4 threes as he's been getting him up. Like it's tough for them when they don't have a lot of like creation for others on this team already. You lose DeRozan, 19 assists for the Bulls in
Yeah.
this game. That's a tough way to win. The Bucks Knicks game was bizarre, as bizarre as it gets in the NBA this year, which is already a weird year in the Garden. And the Knicks without RJ Barrett, very noteworthy, as missing any important player is. Jalen Brunson was super awesome. They needed him to be super awesome because Julius Randle. I saw this on Twitter. I have not verified this myself, but I think the first time ever an NBA player has shot and missed 8 threes in one quarter. So 0 for 8 from 3 in the first quarter. He finishes 1 for 12 from deep, 9 for 23. Excuse me, 9 for 29 from the field. The only two Knicks players who shot 50% or better were Brunson and Emmanuel Quickly, the two guards. They were awesome. They had 67. The rest of the Knicks were brutally bad in this game. They could not get their offense going. And so Brunson was awesome. He was guiding the Knicks. They looked good. They're up 17 late in the third quarter. And then the Bucks figure it out down the stretch. They defend well in the final frame. They get enough points to win. 38 in the fourth for Milwaukee in the win. And Giannis, look, doesn't even have to be that good in this game because they got a ton of points. Drew Holiday had 10 in the final frame. Brook Lopez hit 2 threes. He had 10 as well. And the Bucks, at their best, still look pretty good despite being pretty rocky after their really good start.
Yeah, it still seems like there might be a trade away from being the dominant team. They still have a lot of the pieces, and the experience certainly is there. But at the same time, I just don't feel as overtly confident in that group as I have been in the past. But having said that, I think they still look damn good. They're still, obviously, with Giannis in there, their chances are just as good as any other team in the East as emerging as a title contender. So you have to tip your hat to them. I'm more concerned about the Knicks, though. Like, what does this game say about the Knicks? Like, Randall continues to be a very inefficient player. I know there was some, albeit premature, all-star buzz about him, but do you believe that they can continue to stay above 500 and push for one of the top seeds in the East, or is that a dream that will certainly die by the end of the year?
Yeah, they're in seventh right now, one game out of 6. Like, I think they can get there. And Randall, look, is scoring pretty well this year. I think he's
he's not shy about shooting, that's for sure. 1 of 12. Like, at some point you have to say, you know what, it's just not my night. They're not falling. But he doesn't have that little voice inside of his head to tell him to stop.
Yeah, this is his best. Ironically, his best effective field goal percentage season as a Knick, and yet sometimes it still feels like the three ball has become much more of a part of his game. So I think that kind of change, the shot diet change, has helped him be more efficient. But on his worst nights like this, it makes him look really rough, and he did not have the connectivity today, despite being very good on the glass and leading the team with 5 assists. Yeah, the Knicks are, I can't explain it. They have a lot of B players, right? They don't have an A player, and so it's hard for them to be that kind of level of threatening. Even when Emmanuel quickly plays 43 minutes and is a +5, and you lose at home, it's tough. It's without the depth, you have what you have. And on the Bucks side, I agree with you. They're probably a trade away, and when they're getting good play from their first-round rookie Marjon Beauchamp in this game, 8 points, 5 rebounds, and Joe Ingles. This was probably his best game as a Buck. I'd have to look back through everything, but 17 points, 5 assists, plus 14 off the bench. On one hand, yes, they probably need to add one guy, maybe. But if they have Ingles in that mix, once Middleton's back, they might be good enough. They just they haven't really put together the full team yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. No Middleton tonight, so yeah, certainly you can't dismiss them so far. But I don't know. There's something different about this team. They just don't seem as potent as they once did. But that's it. Any other games worth really getting into for tonight?
Amazingly, not really. The Kings blew out the Magic. A lot of blowouts around the league. The Memphis blew out San Antonio. Denver blew out the Lakers without their stars. The Pelicans blew out the Wizards. So, no, I think NBA game to game is your way to go for all the recaps of that action.
Absolutely. Well, we'll move on and we'll talk a little bit about the implications of the Kevin Durant injury in the next segment. But first, let me tell you a little bit about today's episode being brought to you by Prize Picks. It's so easy to use. Believe me, if you haven't done so already, you're doing yourself a disservice. Try Prize Picks. It's basically just you against the projected numbers. You can take Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points, and that's it. It's you pick the players that you want to pick, and you just pick 2 to 6 of them, and it's against their Prize Picks projections for the night, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's not competing against other people. It's just you versus the available projections. And Prize Picks offers projections in any sport that you might imagine watching. That includes the NBA, the NFL while it's still on, the PGA, college football, women's and men's college basketball, disc golf, cricket, any sport you can imagine. They'll have projections there, and you can place an entry in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with a promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app today. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA.
Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Nets to hear more about what we're about to talk about. Kevin Durant is out with an MCL injury for about a month. Adrian Wojnarowski reports the Nets say they'll reevaluate him in 2 weeks, I believe, was what the original press release said out of Brooklyn. Look, this still blows my mind to say. I had to pull it up to make sure I was right. The Nets lost to the Kings 153 to 121 on November 15th. They fell to 6-9 in that game. They've lost 4 times since in 2 months. They have been by a mile the best team in the league since mid-November, and Kevin Durant, among many things, is the biggest reason why, right? 30 points per game score, the most efficient season of his career, and I just read a post about this from Shane Young. Maybe the best mid-range shooting season the league has ever seen, and still playing good defense, playing a lot of minutes, 36 minutes for this Nets team.
Yeah.
You were at this game. Maybe was it in Miami? Jimmy Butler falling onto his knee in the game. It was just unfortunate. But look, for the Nets have talent. Like I don't think they'll be like miserably bad without him. But given the vibes that they had and how good he's playing, this is just really tough for Brooklyn.
It is, but at the same time, I feel like you do. I'm a little optimistic in the sense that what I saw yesterday in that win against Miami was some great depth from them, and not just that, but you also have Kyrie Irving, who's still a legitimate superstar, and he was the main reason. Like, he was dominating Miami in a way that Kevin Durant was not. And I don't know if it was just because he played 30 minutes before he got hurt, and he was still very, very good, but he was just not the dominant factor there. It was Kyrie. And so when you have that kind of player that can shift a game so completely and single-handedly, I think your chances are still good. You're getting some great minutes from Nick Claxton at center. Ben Simmons seems really, really comfortable in his role now, primarily as a defensive player, but also a capable ball handler and the occasional scorer if he gets the right mismatch opportunity. And you like their depth. I mean, they're getting a little bit out of, Royce O'Neal, T.J. Warren, former Pacer, who will probably wind up starting, I think, in Durant's place there. Joe Harris, still a competent three-point shooter. It's a much better roster than what people give them credit for. Everybody looks at the drama in Brooklyn and assumes, it's just KD and Kyrie, they're the problem, for better or for worse. But they've also got some good complementary players there, and I think that's a big part of why they've been as capable and dominant as they have. And you know what? We've also got to give credit to Jacques Vaughn. Like, seeing him handle he's so confident, so engaged. He's so much better as a coach and so much more prepared than he was in his first head coaching assignment in Orlando. And it's just a completely different person. And he just feels so much more comfortable out there in that role. And I think the players have completely bought into what he's bringing to the system. So I think they can tread water. They created just enough of a cushion where I think they'll be safe. And if they can get KD back in 3 weeks or so, maybe a month, they can tread water again for that prolonged period of time and still be good enough and carry them through the All-Star break, and he'll bounce back, and in the second half of the season he'll be able to carry them the way he did earlier.
Look, I know you go to these press conferences before and after games. Jacques Vaughn is delightful. He is
Yes.
An awesome dude to talk to, like, to the point that I'm smiling when he can talk about anything and I leave the room like, oh, that was awesome. And I think that has been important for this Nets team as much as anything. Yeah, I think T.J. Warren is one of the guys I wanted to mention among a few. But, when you look at this Nets team, something that has when they played in Indy, they rested a bunch of guys. But they've had 16 players play 13 or more games. Like, their depth is pretty good. They've needed them a lot of the time for the many dramatic reasons that you kind of talked about earlier, but they've done a good job when they've been out there. And the fact that they're able to have those guys play and have experience means they'll definitely be worse. Don't get me wrong.
There's no way
Probably,
around it.
yeah, but they have TJ Warren coming off the bench, who is still a good player, a 10 points per game guy on moderately good efficiency. Like his effective field goal percentage this year is 58%. That's fine. That works, right? Like his volume will go up, his efficiency will drop a little, certainly, but that works. Watanabe's been good on the wing for them. Like Royce O'Neal started every game. They have bodies to still fill the position okay, just with worse players. And the trickle down effect with a lot of these big injuries is rarely the direct one, right? Rarely from Durant to Warren is where you lose a ton. It's usually from your backup to your big reserve. Where you're like, oh crap, we're playing a real negative now. But they don't really have that on the wing. Even a guy like Kessler Edwards can hold his own if they need to play him a few minutes every game. So yes, they'll be worse, but they are uniquely set up to do an okay job with this. I don't know who their new starter will be. Maybe it'll be Joe Harris, who goes back into the starting five, but they have a lot of options to be fine for a month.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. And look, I think there's the byproduct that everybody always tends to forget, especially for a team that is in title contention as the Nets are, is that this gives everybody else an opportunity to shine and congeal in a way that maybe they hadn't, because it's so easy to defer to Durant and to just let him take over games. And he's so good at it and has been historically and will be again. Like that's the thing. The hope anyway is that if he does come back from injury at full strength, that he'll be the same Kevin Durant of old and he'll still be the force to be reckoned with in the playoffs. That won't be a problem there. But as far as everybody else, to get that kind of experience, to be able to rise to the challenge, this season has been such a surprising one for the Brooklyn Nets in terms of how they've turned things around from the drama and everything that happened over the course of the start of the season, the firing of Steve Nash, and on and on. It just seemed like this team was ready to implode, and they've done the exact opposite. Because of Durant, because of Irving, because of Jacques Vaughn, they've just been able to find ways to continue winning. So I tend to be a little bit more optimistic, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point in a future episode of Locked On NBA.
That's right. And the wings are the easy guys to pinpoint as replacements, but like Kyrie's gonna have to step up too, right? Like he will by default have to shoulder more load. He already has the ball a lot, but now it's, hey, you already were the scoring guy. Now you have to be more of a creating guy. Like this was weird. I was looking this up before we started, but Durant actually averages more assists per game than Irving does this year.
Yeah.
And, he has the ball. They both have the ball quite a bit. Like Kyrie will have to be a little bit better in the playmaking department. I thought this was noteworthy that Durant had a similar injury last year and missed like 7 weeks, a long time. Apparently it's going to be less than that, and it was a similar injury, which is good news for the Nets. And just to have it on the record, with Durant on, the Nets net rating this year plus 6.2, without a minus 1.5, which is negative, but close enough to zero that, again, I think they'll be okay when he's out.
Yeah, good point.
Well, can I give you one more ripple effect on this?
Yeah, please.
You know what's in a month, David?
Is
the All-Star game.
Oh, okay.
Is there going to be a replacement for Kevin Durant, or is he playing? This is the most irrelevant ripple effect, but you never know. There could be an All-Star who's a first-time All-Star because of this injury.
No doubt about that. But even I think in another episode we've talked about like who's likely to be elected as a starter, right? And I mean, I know that at some point Jason Tatum was maybe on the bubble, him, Joel Embiid, something like that. There was some player in the front court that would have to sit out. Now, maybe not so much of an option if Durant's not available. So that's interesting. I had not considered that. I also wondered though if maybe if he does wind up missing more time after the initial evaluation, does that make Brooklyn more interested in acquiring a player to help kind of stem the tide a little bit? Like, are they going to be active in the trade market for a kind of player that might produce something or give them some kind of quality minutes off the bench? Because you're obviously not going to be able to get anybody to reproduce what Durant does, but you still at least want to shore up their depth. If you wind up starting Warren or Harris in your place, your bench takes a hit there. Do you wind up adding somebody else to kind of, again, be able to provide some punch there for a bench that has been fairly good all season?
Sean Marks does a good job building that team, so I'm sure he'll find something if it's there. Their free agency was awesome. Like, I think everybody loved their minimum signings, and now is when that will really matter, right? When those guys have to play serious minutes all the time and a lot. We'll see how this ends up breaking for the Nets. And of course, like you said, Locked On NBA will be certainly talking about it and seeing where the Nets goes, because for a hot second there, they were tied for first in the East. Like, they've been that level of good since their crummy start. They're still in second to this day, so we'll see where they are in a month. And this is one of those things too where, like, if you're the Nets a month from now and you have, I don't know how many games, I have looked at their schedule, but you have one game between when he's cleared to return in the All-Star break, like, you're just going to sit him through the All-Star break,
Right.
So, going off of Woj's reporting of a month, maybe the All-Star break makes sense. If it's 3 weeks, maybe he'll play a little before then. But that timeline is what makes sense to me.
All right. Well, we'll talk about some of the biggest surprises of the season, whether it's an individual player or some of the teams that we did not expect to either play so well or not so well in the next segment. But before that, just wanted to tell you a little bit about today's episode being brought to you by BetOnline.net. Still your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football to basketball. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today's episode also brought to you by TurboTax. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. You can meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. You can show your eyes things that are not taxes. You can unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleep through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Full service products only. A video meeting with an expert does required in order to get your taxes done. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees for more information. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA.
Everybody, thank you so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Check out Locked On Sports Today. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network, giving you the local coverage only Locked On can provide on YouTube, Odyssey, wherever you get podcasts, including wherever you're listening right this second. Today felt like a fitting day to talk about NBA surprises because several teams, including the Celtics, who just played their 41st game, have reached the halfway point of the NBA season, which, by the way, is bananas. It feels like this season just started.
Yeah.
I can't explain why this one has felt faster than other ones in the past, but here we are, halfway for several teams in the East. Some teams over halfway by a game or two, including Detroit, for example. The NBA season, good time to say, what is the most surprising player team thing in the league? Not the most surprising, we'll list a couple. David, you can go first. Give me something that has surprised you this NBA season.
Well, I wanted to talk about the Brooklyn Nets. I think we've done that enough, but we kind of hinted at that in the second segment, just the fact that they've been able to right the ship and everything else. But there is a team in the Western Conference that has been much better than expected. That's the Utah Jazz. A few games below 500 now after a really incredibly good start. And the main reason for their excellent start to the season, Lauri Markkanen, who is a damn good player when no one expected to be. Like, he's in his third team right now in a relatively young career, still a very young player, just age 25, and he has emerged into a very, very good player. 7 feet tall, has the length, has the size, still shooting incredibly well, nearly 42% from three-point range, averaging almost 25 points per game. Just incredible turnaround season for him, just absolutely unexpected. I know that young players will sometimes just find their footing, but usually it's a kind of steady upward trajectory, right? You don't just see this sudden 1 year explosion. And maybe that's a byproduct of being in Utah, getting more opportunities, not being pigeonholed into a particular role on a star-laden team or something like that. But I still don't think anybody expected Markkanen to have this kind of impact, especially when nobody really considered that the Jazz would win a lot of games. Actively rebuilding, trading away Donovan Mitchell, trading away Rudy Gobert, getting some good players in exchange where you knew they would be at least competitive, if not particularly good. They've been both, and Markkanen's still a big part of that.
Yeah, 24.5 points per game. Ridiculous for a guy like that. Like, I never would have thought he'd sniff that in his NBA career, given how it's gone up to this point. And you know what's kind of a strange but apt fit for comparing careers for Lauri Markkanen, who's 25? How about Victor Oladipo? Oladipo spends 4 years in Orlando and gets a lot better, and then gets traded to OKC, and is kind of deferring to better players there, and then goes to Indiana, and he's the dude. And at age
Right.
25, in his 5th year, he explodes, and he's awesome. And everyone's like, where did this come from? Marketing, 4 years with the Bulls, didn't click, goes to Cleveland, gets a little better, and then boom, he's at age 25 and has this explosive season. I just thought those parallels were pretty interesting. He's been awesome. The Jazz are better than their record says, which is weird to say because somehow they're 20 and 23. Their net rating says they should be 22 and 21, and this is kind of sad. They've lost 7 of their last 8, 6 of those 7 losses by 5 points or less, right? Like they're right there.
They're
And
competitive.
still looking like that team they were early in the season, but they can't quite get the wins. But yes, they have been surprising. And Markkanen in particular, who's probably going to be an all-star, I would say, has been awesome.
Deserving. So, I mean, I was going to go on about the Oladipo comparison because in Oladipo, his case in Orlando, he was always kind of, well, one, a rebuilding team, kind of still trying to figure out this tweener where they weren't quite sure if they were going to play him at the point guard or shooting guard. They weren't exactly aware of where he fit best. And of course, he went through the carousel of coaches too. So that was just a big, well, it was a big blight to start a career that way. I'm marketing going through something similar, I guess, in Chicago and his tenure in Cleveland. But anyway, we'll wrap it up. What's your big surprise of the season so far?
I will similarly go to the West. The Kings. The Kings are good. And sometimes the Kings have good stretches, but the Kings have never been good.
Are you only doing this because Matt's not on the episode today? Because if it was him, he has never said a positive thing about the Sacramento Kings. As fans are always happy to tell him on Twitter.
Look, I wasn't that into the NBA when I was a kid, and I'm kind of young, right? Last time the Kings made the playoffs, I was 8. Like, I've never seen the Kings be good in my life, and this is a thing. This is a moment for them. What was that?
No, they're very, very good. They're incredibly fun to watch. I did see them in the playoffs. I am a little older than you are, so I do remember those Jason Williams, Vlade Divac, Mike Bibby, etc. Those were very good teams.
Excuse me, I was 9. That is my fault.
That's okay. That's okay. So you don't recall the Peja Stojakovic era and Chris Webber in Sacramento?
I know of them from like NBA Live games and
the LA Queens, according to Shaquille O'Neal. Like that was a heated rivalry there.
Peja's played in Indiana, so I know him pretty well. Like Brad Miller played in Indiana. Ron Artest played in both Sacramento and Indiana. So I actually do know a lot of the overlapping players for one reason or another. But yeah, look, to actually gush about the Kings, like you said, they're fun on top of being good. Like 2018 is already something. They're firmly in a playoff spot in the East, but like De'Aaron Fox is having his best season ever. Sabonis is the perfect complement for that team. They stole a young Kevin Huerter from Atlanta. They drafted the right guy for their system. Like Mike Brown's done an awesome job. He's fun but serious in all the right ways. Like Monty McNair nailed every move for this team to finally be like a serious NBA team, and here they are. The Kings haven't been this in a long time, but that's what makes it surprising to me. Like you could say the Jazz or Pacers have exceeded expectations by more, but the Kings just have this stigma where it's just like, it's the Kings. They're kind of kicking it this year. They said, "F that, we're gonna be good."
There's a stability and structure and intent to this franchise that we have not seen in decades. And I think that's a big part of it too, is that all of a sudden it just seems like there's a clear vision and it's being, it's shared through everybody from the front office to the coaches to the players, and it's being implemented. It's being like brought to life in a way that we have not seen. And that's so rewarding to see, because you don't want to see ineptitude at any level. Like you could be a bad team because you don't have the talent or because you're actively rebuilding and you're trying to figure it out, but you don't want to see just mindless meandering crap year after year. And I feel for Kings fans who've had to deal with that, where you're not quite sure, where all of a sudden things go well and then you go, you know what, let's not continue on this trend. Let's trade away a star player, or let's fire a coach with some promise. And that's who Sacramento has been. So for them to be on track now for what feels like, again, the first time in a long time, certainly rewarding. So kudos to them. And you should be listening to Locked On Kings regularly for updates on that team, because I think they've been a lot of fun. But can I pick another surprise of the season so far?
You can.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity for you, because I think the Indiana Pacers have been a fantastic surprise to the season. Like, we talked about right before we started recording, like they have been so good. And I remember talking to you just a few weeks ago or a month ago, last time we did the show together, and you were kind of pessimistic about, realistic, I think, not pessimistic, realistic. You thought they weren't going to be a legitimate playoff team. They started off well, but eventually they'd cool off. People would figure them out. That hasn't been the case. Tyrese Halliburton, an all-star, or it should be a deserving all-star player, getting great contributions from all over the roster. Rick Carlisle getting the most out of this team, and they've just been. It's not necessarily a really fun team to watch, at least not from my perspective. Necessarily a really good team, and certainly much more effective than anybody expected it to be. You would agree on that note?
Yes, I would. When we talked too, it was right before they had this like really tough stretch of games coming up. Like they had a pretty easy November schedule, and they had a few clutch disasters. And they were 15-16. They lost to the Knicks, and I thought, okay, they're not going to get back over 500, right? Like young teams, it's hard to respond that way. And they've just quietly been like one of the three best teams in the NBA since I said that out loud. So they've won 8 of their last 10. Halliburton looks every part of an all-star this year, as you saw in Miami close up with 43 points in the game winner. And
Did I? Yeah,
one of only
I guess
two
I
or
did.
three guys with over 10 assists per game this year. It's like him and Harden. I think that's it in the entire NBA, and he's doing that with also 20 points per game. And like, this rookie Benedict Mathurin's awesome, and Miles Turner's
Yep.
having the best year of his career. Like for them to be this good, if you had told me they had 123 of their first 41 games, I would have said, okay, basically everybody has to have a career year, and that's what's happening. So that will help you be surprising when everybody looks good at the same time.
So I guess the question is it sustainable? Do they continue on this upward trajectory? Do they stay the course and not blow up the team or not make a significant trade before the trade deadline? Or what's the expectation out of the Indiana Pacers this season?
It all hinges on Mr. Turner, right? Like if he signs an extension, I think that they'll call it a team for the year, right? Everybody else will be under contract who is in the rotation for another season after this year. Like there you go, you can run it back with the same squad. Your two best players are 22 and 20 years old. Seems good to go. But if they can't figure out what to do with him and they have to trade him, then they might have to adjust and change their team a little bit. But look, like I just said, Mathurin's 20, Halliburton's 22. Like they'll be fine. They can survive a crappy last 2 months of the season. Can I give you one more surprise that isn't a positive one?
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to
We've
hear
gone
those.
over time, but I wanted to talk about this team. I was very high on the Nick Nurse Masai Ujiri idea in Toronto this year. I love the concept of big, huge guys everywhere who are just skilled enough to all piece together and be this really disruptive defense. And the Raptors have been pretty bad. Pretty bad. Team 17 and 23, 11th in the East. A game and a half out of the play-in. Not the playoffs, the play-in. That is surprising to me because they have mostly the same team they had last year that was pretty good. And they've just kind of completely stagnated. Fred VanVleet's not as good. Scotty Barnes is struggling a little bit more than he did as a rookie. Siakam's been amazing. He's probably going to be an all-star. But in general, the team just hasn't lived up. And this maybe is my own expectations more than anyone else's. But I thought they would be much better. And that's very surprising to me.
No, so did I. There are teams that, like, I wasn't as high on the DeJounte Murray pairing in Atlanta. I didn't think Rudy Gobert in Minnesota would work, and those things have turned out to be just the case. However, when you look at the Toronto Raptor, yeah, they have some shortcomings. They're particularly small. Small and big at the same time, like big on average across every position, but small at the center position. At the same time, you think that Nick Nurse is going to be able to figure it out, get the most out of this roster. That hasn't been the case. And I just can't figure it out. Despite, a career year from OG Anunoby, too. He's been very good. Pascal Siakam, as you mentioned, really, really, really solid season overall. There seems to be something off. And I know there was injuries, and maybe it's just as simple as VanVleet being way, way, way off of his career averages. But I can't seem to figure it out. And they get so close. And I know there's a lot of frustration amongst Raptors fans. And I understand that. And I think there was a piece that came out on ESPN today, whether or not the next 2 weeks are going to determine, the next few weeks rather, are going to determine the course of the Raptors season. Do they blow it up? Do they trade Anunoby or Siakam or anybody else? Do they find a suitor for VanVleet despite his problems this season? They could wind up blowing up the team. The last time I remember that question was brought up by Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, and he's suggesting that they should blow up the Raptors. They did it. They wound up winning a championship that same season. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to repeat this year. But at the same time, I still do think that they should keep this core together because, look, there's history there. You trust that they'll figure it out. I can't believe that you could be so good over the last few years and then just suddenly be so bad. Like, this is basically the same core and at its heart. And I don't see why you could just seem to find a way to figure it out.
I agree with that. And the reason I would stick together as a group is I think Masai is a really good team builder and GM. And I think Nick Nurse is one of the most creative coaches in the league. And I think his style can sometimes not work, but I think that those two together can be creative enough to solve some of the Raptors' issues. That said, they haven't yet, and we're halfway through the year. We're out of time for more surprises, which is surprising in itself, David, that we have talked for as long as we have. Everybody, thank you a ton for listening today and making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day tomorrow. Jake Madison and John Krause will bring you the latest happenings from around the league as we do here on Locked On NBA. Thank you all a ton for listening. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow.